Hi guys, welcome to another business leadership blog. Today my guest is Richard Kiernicki. Richard is the author of new book, The Capitalist's Worst Nightmare Come True, The Crucifixion of Capital. He's a financial advisor, he's a mentor, he's a keynote speaker, and he's in all major mainstream media recently because of the book. And Richard, just researching your profile, I learned so much about the financial industry and also many other topics. Thank you so much for time today and welcome to podcast.
Gurmeet, thank you very much for having me on your show. I'm looking very excitedly. I see that you've interviewed many very famous people and people who are of an influential nature. And I'm looking forward to joining your roster, and I hope we have a great time.
Yeah,
sure we will.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. I'm looking forward to, one thing is, as a business side, I'm looking forward to learning from you. You've been around, in a financial industry for so long, and you've been running a businesses, you've been building, supporting companies or mentoring people. You've been in industry for so long, and somebody like, somebody new like me in a business sector, if you just walk us through your journey, Richard, how do you get to that point where you decided it was important to write a book that, if you just walk us through what you've been doing before this?
Wow, that's a long story, Gurmeet, but I will promise to keep it as short as I can.
Okay.
I think that one of the most amazing things that we all share in common as human beings is our intuition. Mm-hmm. The one thing that we don't share, okay, is the ability to listen. And hence, we miss a lot of our personal messages. In other words, many of us who are intuitive, we miss a lot of those messages, or we take them very lightly. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you've been somewhere and heard, maybe your wife or your daughter say something about, "Oh, that guy gives me the creeps." Mm-hmm. And they know, there's a knowing about, certain things, that it's intuitive, that it's something that comes through in that light. And I think that's a part of what we really need to strive for in our own world. It's one thing to say, when you ask people, what are your most important ambitions? And most of them will tell you, I want to retire rich. Mm-hmm. But it's not at the end in the sense of what do you do about being rich? Okay, it's about what do you do being every day to treat yourself like you're a rich person, and hence give yourself that beautiful gift of intuition, because that's what's going to lead you forward in your career. Mm-hmm. Many people have conversations with themselves. Some people call that crazy. Yet at the same time, many people are looking for those unique ideas, those things that game change the concept of everything. And this last couple of years has been an amazing opportunity for those who are keeping their eyes open. There's been a lot of amazing game changers. Let's put it that way. Mm-hmm.
Wow, you mentioned a couple of things, Richard. There, one is rich. You mentioned, is that rich that people drive for? Is it a wealth? Is it the same thing to you? Or what I recently look for, what my goals usually are: financial freedom. That's what I drive for. So is that just becoming rich is a target, or is it a wealthy, or is it financial freedom? What is that? What is those things? The difference in these three?
Well, that's a really good question, because I find there was a fella that was running a program called Excel a number of years ago, and he gave me a very interesting definition. And he said, between the difference between wealth and riches. Mm-hmm. And he said that, simply put, that wealth would be what you would have left over if you lost all of your riches. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a very powerful statement, because most people who acquire a lot of money, especially those that acquire a lot of money from an inheritance perspective, or maybe a windfall of a business or something, sometimes those people are more inclined to think about the rich aspect of life, but they're not concerned with the wealthy aspect. So I think that wealth encompasses everything that riches don't. So wealth is your family, wealth is your health, wealth is the people that you associate with, or that you work with, or how you serve your clients, or how you work in business. That's true wealth to me, building all those relationships and being of service to others. Whereas when people are rich and money seems to just go from generation to generation. Eventually, that money is lost, and the meaning behind what made that money is often case it's lost. So when we take a look at these things, to me, to get a better definition for ourselves is quite important, because that definition between rich and wealthy is a very important factor, and it's a way that we show up in the world for other people to look at us and they say, well, that guy's rich, or that guy's wealthy, or that woman is wealthy, or that family is wealthy. To me, that means a lot more.
Interesting. So I think you mentioned that a little bit in your book as well. So let's talk about your book. How does the idea came along, and what is the book? What would you like to people to understand what the book is about? If you just give us a little bit synopsis from your side.
Well, the book is an idea that came to me in the 2008 financial crisis. And in fact, on October the 18th, 2008, I was reading the Globe and Mail newspaper, and the headline was "Wanted a New Financial Order." And I started to read that thinking that'll be an interesting article to read. And I'm reading through that, and I recognized in Sarkozy and Merkel were, excuse me, they were having a chat. And while they were having a chat, they both realized that the financial system was broken. So the simple reality is that, well, yes, if something is broken, you've got to fix it. But the question becomes, how do you fix it? And the sad part with society is they keep trying to fix a broken wheel. So in other words, if you already know something in essence really doesn't work anymore, then the question becomes, well, what are the alternatives? Because nobody, since I've started writing this book, they may have alternatives to capitalism. We're listening to people talk about circle economy and quantum financial and all of these other things, but they all have to do with the same stuff. They all have to do with money, whether it's in gold or Bitcoin or silver, precious metals, or stocks, or private shares in companies. It's still all about money at some level. I don't think it was our maker's intent, to call success the amount of money that you made, or I laughingly say sometimes, who are you on the Forbes richest of the world's 8 billion people, right? And I think that's a key factor, Gurmeet. I think that those are key factors in starting to really understand that everything around us is a vision of a vibration of thought that someone had. So the question becomes, well, why can't we make time equity or a non-monetary system, a non-economic system, a non-capitalistic system? Why can't we make that work? And the simple reality is it's because people think that their time is worth more than somebody else's time.
Interesting.
Okay? So a lot of people, for example, in my book, I use the analogy of a surgeon and a floor cleaner. And the surgeon's always going to tell you he's worth more from the context of time than is the guy who's cleaning the floor. But I'm not sure for myself that just going to school and doing the difficult task of becoming a surgeon is any more difficult than being on your knees and washing the operating room theater. And in both cases, we need a skilled surgeon to help a patient survive, but we also need an operating theater that is clean, that's sterile. If anything, COVID has taught us that there are mutants and variants and all of these other things. We've all heard probably that vaccines have a tendency of getting stronger when they're being fought. So there's a whole industry that's begging to be born on cleanliness. A hospital will bid for a doctor, and they'll pay a doctor huge money to be a part of that hospital's team. On the other hand, what's the cleaning budget? Right? They're going to find the cheapest deal out there in most cases. That does not necessarily mean that that's going to help that hospital save lives. So I think we've got to start looking at things. And I know there's a lot of people out there that disagree with me because they have a sense of what I call, let's just say, they're a little more egotistical than other people who would, let's just say, consider ourselves equal. But then we've got to go back to our constitutional rights that stated previously that all men are equal. And to me, that goes way beyond, i.e., the money, okay, that most people differentiate between those that are and are not equal is usually a monetary consideration.
Mm-hmm.
Their house, their cars, their boats, their planes, their trains, all of these things that they acquire in the context of their lifetime. But I know that working with with many people as a financial advisor, I can honestly tell you that it's not the amount of money, okay, that people have that makes them happy in their lives, okay, but they think it is.
Mm-hmm.
And they do everything that they can possibly do to continue to make more money. And the
See.
funniest part about that is, okay, they're not using the skills of the billionaires, okay, to
Mm-hmm.
make their money. In other words, where are you going to go to get leadership? Okay, especially in the financial game.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm certainly not going to get it at a bank,
Definitely. Yeah.
okay, but I am probably going to get it if I start reading Warren Buffett
Mm-hmm.
and I start to understand how did Buffett create as well.
Yeah.
So when we start taking a look at where do we take our lessons from, the reality is that we're usually very, let's just say, in agreement to working with somebody who looks like they're successful. But to
Mm-hmm.
me, I've learned that success is not a physical thing. It's not something that's outside myself. Success to me is what's inside me. Am I a happy man? Am I a
Mm-hmm.
contented person in my relationship? Do I have a great relationship? Do people like me? Do people dislike me? Do my children want to come and visit me or not come and visit me?
Mm-hmm.
So to me, success is, far beyond strictly the material aspects that in most cases, materialism and consumerism are the signs that traditionally, if you will, those are going to be the things that focus on, well, this person's successful because they got a big house, they got this
Mm-hmm.
car, they got that boat, or whatever the case may be. But there's a lot of really, truly amazing people that aren't rich, but their
Mm-hmm.
success in the way that they drive it is that they share everything that they have with everybody in the world. We have how many billionaires in the world? And yet, the majority of the people are the people who are giving away the small amounts to help other people with the complexity and the problems of their lives. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of people that get together to help other people, whether it's students or teachers or indigenous peoples, whatever. It comes in very strange. But at the same point in time, we have all of this money sitting there that could do all of that based on the 2,000 billionaires that we have.
Mm-hmm.
So the question really becomes, why is most of all of this social stuff still really happening in the middle class?
Yeah.
People helping people.
Yeah, because they're giving a lot more time to people, not just money, but the richest they can give money, but they probably don't want to give it time. But you working people, and as you mentioned in a book, that giving somebody a time is a most generous thing you can do to another human being, is just giving you time.
And it is, and I think it's also respectful of ourselves that when we find ourselves in environments that are not worthy of spending that time, then one needs to know how to walk away from that. So subsequently, if someone's in a relationship or if they're in a work situation that's not working for them, they're not happy about going, these are things that most people still will try to hang on to, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting. Yesterday, I think it was yesterday, a gentleman shared with me a sort of a definition of billionaires. And it was very interesting the way that he commented about billionaires. And he said that they often cannot perhaps even understand, okay, the power and the ability that they can control in the context of making change in the world, not only from the perspective of the money and the things that they do, but being able to really lump all of those wonderful things together. There
Mm-hmm.
was a gentleman a while back
Mm-hmm.
who caught my attention. What was that guy's name? The Asian? There was a fella, I can't think of his name right now. I was just looking to see if my assistant was in the back.
Mm-hmm.
And he caught my attention by saying that he's going to interview, I think, 8,000 people and put them in a spaceship and take them for a trip around the world.
Okay.
And I was fascinated. I'm like, what, at no cost? Like, this is amazing. For sure, I'm going to sign up for this.
Mm-hmm.
So I signed up for it, and I thought about it, and I thought, wow. And I even had a picture with the organization with me inside a space helmet stuff, you know, like, hey, yeah. And I was aware of what the calendar of events was that was going to move this opportunity for people, so that this fella could pick out who, you know, he would end up inviting. I think there was a total of 8 people.
Mm-hmm.
And his name was Yasuka Mazawa or something like that.
Okay.
And he's the Japanese billionaire's, I think, son, or has billionaire connections. And he wanted to take, like I said, a bunch of people, you know, for a flight around the world. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, wow, that's so generous that this guy would even consider doing that for people who, potentially speaking, maybe some of them have never even driven across the country as a form of excitement.
Mm-hmm.
But imagine having an opportunity, and then imagine going one way differently, you know, and then right after this guy, for whatever reason, he didn't follow through on what his objectives were. All of a sudden, Richard Branson and was it Musk who decided that they were going to, you know, jump into a space capsule and go around the world?
Jeff Bezos. You're talking Bezos.
Yeah, Bezos, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, wow, that's really fantastic. Good for you. Okay. Certainly, I mean, it's something that's on my bucket list, but I don't think I'm ever going to have $2 million to take a trip.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of interesting, because those guys really, in my mind, they didn't get it.
Mm-hmm.
That they could do something. They're kind of oblivious that most people can't. And there's a wall that gets separated between those ultra rich, because they feel perhaps that there's something about them that's a lot different than a person who's, pardon the expression, just as normal as maybe you and I.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same point in time, we take a look at, again, I'll go back to the money that's sitting on the table, going back all the way to Rockefellers and people, the oil barons from over 100 years ago. And somehow I don't get the correlation between the amount of money and still the problems that people have on the planet.
Mm-hmm. So what we're saying is that just the system is set up that it can benefit only few, not everybody. That's on a core. Richard, what you're saying, that, you know, financial institute or any capital system is as built or set up in such a way that it benefit only few people to get rich, and it doesn't do a wealth equality or you know, financial equality and across all the public.
You know, Gurmeet, I'm going to ask you, and I hope you don't mind, I'm going to
no
ask
worries.
you specifically. But did you read chapter 4?
I gone through mostly, yeah, the first, yeah.
And chapter 4 is entitled "The Lie." Okay, how banks work.
Yeah, I saw that math, your formula on the mathematics and how do you calculate that, you know, the compound interest and all those things. Yeah.
Yeah, but if one becomes, in my opinion, financially literate,
mm-hmm.
okay, if you accept the title of financial literate,
okay,
then you have to come to a conclusion that the majority of people, especially the people in our industry, okay, I don't think they're financially literate, or as literate as they could be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I'll go back in a sense that sort of says, well, okay, so what is financial literacy? And the financial literacy is truly knowing, like my book points out, that if I deposit money to the bank and they pay me 1% for the money, and then on the other hand, they scrutinize somebody and they make sure that they hold their house until they die and pay it off, and they go through all of the,
yep,
you know, the characteristics of, is this person a suitable person to lend money to? And then they lend that money out for, let's just say, 4%.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the difference between 4% and 1%?
That's over 300%, 300% times more than you know, they made money off of that, right?
You got that. And technically, it's way more than that, because the bank didn't have any money in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so financial literacy would suggest that instead of putting your money in the bank, that you become a shareholder of the bank and share in the bank's profits. pay less tax because of dividends. Right? The poor guy who put up and got the poor guy who put up the money and got 1% on his money, he lost half of a percentage point to taxes because of the taxation system for interest income. So all I'm merely saying is, if you're financially literate and you don't own the shares of the bank, then you haven't got the message. So the reality would be, and I think it would be quite comical, if there was a magic potion that one day everybody in the world woke up financially literate and they go, hey, I'm not going to put my money in the bank. I'm going to become a shareholder in the bank. And if that would ever happen, there would be no money on deposit. So the bankers don't have any money to lend out. Okay. They can't make profits if there's nobody there to lend out. If they don't have money to lend out to people, you're not going to make a profit. So it shows you in that simple example how fragile the financial system is. Okay, now come on, it really is. Like, we should be laughing about this because I think it's hilarious.
Yeah.
And I spent the majority of the last 40 years trying to explain that to my clients. So after my clients started to understand it's better to buy the milk than it is to own a cow, in the words of my ex-partner, Michael Leachin, okay, then people really aren't getting the message of financial literacy. And I think if that were tackled properly by the populace, I think we would see a huge change in the entire banking system, because the bankers are laughing all the way. Now, let's take that 300% and also understand that with fractional reserve banking, we only need to keep 10 cents of every dollar. So that means we can lend out that other 90 cents and then 81 cents, then, the smaller multiple of that 90% each time somebody makes a deposit of that money. They're making over 6,000%, depending on how far you want to carry the calculation. But let's keep it simple. At a level of slightly more than that 300%, and now we're going to base that on retained 10% and money back lent out at 90%. We're now talking a 2,700% rate of return for the financial institution. I don't know about you, but that's where the guarantee comes from. That's where the smell of guarantee comes from. It comes from the banker's ability to continue to generate money on top of money, okay, because they're the ones who create the rules.
Interesting.
So ultimately, at the end of the day, if we want to change that system, we bring that into awareness, and the system's going to crumble all by itself. We don't have to do anything except for one thing. We have to take a stand, and we all have to become educated to understand what that actually truly means. And therefore, what you said earlier is very true, that the many who fail for the few to win, the ratios will change dramatically if a banking system is allowed to be a part of the future. Because I think that we need to start looking more, and we hear about it all the time. We need to find the cause of something. We need to find the cause of the effect. Well, capitalism is the cause, from my perspective, of most greed, most corruption, and most manipulation in the entire world. So if you want to get rid of the effects, okay, of greed, corruption, and manipulation, you've got to get rid of capitalism. So what's more important than money? To me, it's your time. My time is my most valuable asset. So I spend it carefully, Gurmeet. Okay? I respect your time. I respect the time of other people, because I might not have more time tomorrow. I might not have more time today. So what are the most important things when it comes to, from my perspective, okay, living that quality life? It's to be able to take your time and share that time with others. Whether it's yourself, even spending time with yourself to dig into yourself, to find out what your own personal truth is. And then yet at the same time, to be able to look into and perhaps guide your children. How many children these days are misguided in the context of they really have no idea what's going on? And the worst part with things like Instagram, they don't have time to sit back and think about it. It's one thing and the next thing and the next thing.
Yeah,
And
it's going.
there's virtually no time for people to actually sit down and start to think about this. And in fact, when we take a look at our world, from my perspective, our world's gone backwards in the last 10 years. It was easier 20 years ago,
Yeah.
in many instances, to do things like paperwork. I remember I was one of those poor people that didn't get into the computer system, or computer systems didn't get into their high schools until the year after I left. So I didn't get very much, or in fact virtually zero computer training. And when I sit back and I think about the tools that we have, there's a lot of people who are using those tools of sophistication to create exemplary models of certain things. We're starting to understand that we can change a lot more than what we think we can change, and we find that by error.
Yeah.
The climate crisis didn't materialize in the sense that nobody was really paying attention to it. But all of a sudden you have, let's say, 7 billion cars being driven 24/7, and airplanes and boats and ships and everything that's leaving a carbon footprint. And all of a sudden we start to recognize, wow, we've got something going on here that could be, potentially speaking, in business you call it a career-ending move, but in life you call it a life-ending move.
Yeah.
And do we believe the people? Are we close? Are we even remotely close to climate change so drastic that it could potentially, kill off a significant percentage of the species of humanity? So, maybe we're too smart too late.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the point is that we've got to find ways to work together. And that's another thing that in this last year and a half, that's what we've lost. We've lost effective leadership. We've lost that group of people because all of them are telling a different story at one level. Nobody's speaking the truth. And when people don't get the truth, whether they like it or they don't like it, when people aren't getting the truth, as long as it's uniform, at least they feel comfortable in what their belief system is about it. But the way that this pandemic has been played out in the last year and a half is an atrocity.
You think it's politicized more than it should have been?
Well, I don't know if more or less is the answer, but I think the key thing is to look for all of the truths inside the sickness and find out what is really going on. And I think because when we take a look at what companies own what things, they say that in the next 8 to 10 years, BlackRock and Vanguard are going to own everything on Earth. Well, don't get me wrong, but that doesn't really excite me. If I'm going to own stocks in any company, why not just put all my money in Vanguard? They own everything.
Yeah.
Right? So why not be a part if you're going to own everything? But then there's the confusion that we have from the WEF. You're not going to have anything, and you're going to rent anything that you want.
Yeah.
So there's all of these contradictions, but nobody's really doing anything truthfully from the standpoint of benefiting humanity. And I think it's time that humanity grasped that idea and said, yes, we're going to collectively get together and we're going to show the people who run the program who really runs the program.
Interesting. So let's talk about the time. If the, from your book, I gather the time is a solution to the capitalist, right? So, you look at, you document many different, history, how people perceive a time and how we look in a time. So walk us through, how would the time work? If a time is a solution to capitalism, how do we value time? Don't we value time different? We have put a different value in a different age group in a time. Like when we are younger, we put less value on a time. When you're older, you put more value on a time. How does that come into play if that's a solution to capitalism?
Those are really great questions, Gurmeet, and I'll tell you something. The most amazing thing about this book was learning all the questions, or in fact, finding questions that I even had no knowledge prior to writing the book that they would even be a consideration of being a question. So that's a lot of fun because all of a sudden you're starting to take a look at things. But you're right. When we talked a little bit earlier, we talked about, opening doors to certain things. And when I'll say when the teacher is, or when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So for me, in the context of time, I was ready to add a part to my book that would make that change. And I decided that the name of that would be time equity. And time equity, from my definition, is the continuous progress of existence and events while being fair and impartial. Okay. So the answer is that your time is equal to my time, and my time is equal to your time. So that means if you're a baker, a poet, a musician, a doctor, a leader, a sports enthusiast, it doesn't make any difference. Our time is equal. When we all have a chance to find out what we really want to do and be in our lifetimes, then that's what we strive for. And many of those people who strive for that personal success that's outside of the money part, many of those people have told me over the last 30 years that I would do what I do for free because I love doing it so much. How many motivational speakers tell you every single day, well, if you love your work, then it's not work. But tell that to the majority of people who are working 2 jobs in a place that they don't want to be because that's not what their gift is, right? And yet those people have to pay the same in the context of they've got to pay rent or a mortgage. They've got to buy groceries, food, and clothes. They've got to save for education and all of these other things because we have these misconceptions of time. So the simple reality is, if my time is equal to yours and your time is equal to mine, that means we get a chance to rewrite how we actually become a career person. And because the world is in such flux these days, you know, people talk about artificial intelligence going to take jobs away. Well, maybe it will, but most of the people don't want to do those jobs anyway.
Yeah.
But there's going to be jobs that are going to come out of this work that are going to take people to new and completely different levels. So, for example, I'll pick on the environment for a second.
Okay.
When we're sitting back and we're talking about the environmental issues, there are so many individual opportunities within recycling, as an example, okay, that we can create an entire industry around these things. My apologies. So when we start thinking about that, and we start thinking about the fact that, wow, we're complaining about something that we can't even see from the perspective of we haven't even started to imagine it. Well, let's start to imagine, okay, like Star Trek, a world that has unlimited potential. And in one of the Star Trek movies, they actually talk in the movie that there's a professor who created the warp speed system. And he was asked by the people on the Enterprise, well, how much money does a spaceship like this cost in your time? And to bring it back in time, how does all this cost? And they tell him, well, we don't have money in the 24th or the 26th century. Okay, we find that it limits humanity's potential. And it's true, because when we don't have enough money, we don't fix the things that we need to fix. But we have enough money. We just don't want to spend it to fix the things that we need to fix. Did Gulf clean up their oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, or whatever that the oil and gas company was?
PE, I believe. Yeah.
No. When they were fined $1 billion for the mess to clean it up after all was said and done, gasoline prices virtually doubled. The gas companies didn't pay for it. The citizenry of the world, or in North America, they paid for it. But people are oblivious to the fact. They're like, 8 years ago or 9 years ago, oil peaked at $120 a barrel. Okay, you'd remember that.
Yeah.
And gasoline here in Toronto was $1.15 a liter. Okay, what's the price per barrel today? $80. Okay, how much are we paying per liter?
170, 160, something like that.
Hey, isn't that time that we just looked around us and woke up?
Yeah.
Hey, what's going on? Gasoline should be literally, or should have been. People talk to me all the time about, as an example, we have all of these considerations for carbon footprint. But how many people do you see driving big Fords, okay, big Dodge, right, big GMC and Chevy pickup trucks? Okay, the guy who's in construction needs one.
Mm-hmm.
But the Escalades that moms are driving to pick up their kids at school, okay, just way out of reach.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And yet at the same time, the manufacturers are going against the carbon footprint. They should be building small cars, small vehicles, especially for intercity dwellers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I loved the smart car when they came out. They should have put them together like shopping carts at a shopping mall.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you come into the city, you jump from your truck into a smart car and you drive downtown.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many things that people could reinvent in the way that things are being done that would truly be harmonious with the words that they say.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to help me get rid of the carbon footprint, get rid of the 8-cylinder trucks to the people who don't need them.
Mm-hmm.
And those are just a couple of, small ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we look at, as an example, we look at climate change. We're looking at energy,
Mm-hmm.
right? Who are the people who are looking at the whole process of energy? They're the existing energy providers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do
Mm-hmm.
they want to know about the new ideas in energy?
Mm-hmm.
No, because we want to be protecting, okay, as a protectionist, we want to protect our interests in this electricity system.
Mm-hmm.
And it's time that when we really lose that perspective, okay, of the riches that we perceive,
Mm-hmm.
when we lose that perspective and we actually start to think, in fact, I'll put it to you like this, Gurmeet.
Okay.
Pretend when you wake up tomorrow morning that you woke up into a world of real abundance. And I'm not talking about financial abundance,
Mm-hmm.
where people share their tomatoes, that grow their tomatoes, or do their whatever it is that they do. We all benefit from each other's work. How much more fun would we have in our days if we weren't concerned, okay, with how much something costs and how much do we have to save?
Mm-hmm.
So the United Nations, pardon me, I have a tickle.
It's okay.
United Nations has a mandate of peace and harmony on the planet.
Okay.
And in 1932, when the UN was known as the League of Nations, they actually passed the 13-month, 28-day calendar.
Mm-hmm.
And on January the 1st, okay, when it was supposed to be implemented, the Vatican shut it down. They said, this ain't happening. And
Mm-hmm.
they also did it on other occasions. So they basically keep the Gregorian calendar, which basically keeps us confused as to the time of things.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, I was recently made aware of the fact that there are many established companies that actually use a 13-month, 28-day calendar, because the comparisons, okay, are easy to put on top of each other and gauge, whether they had a better month this month than last month.
Mm-hmm.
So when we start thinking about the stress associated with financial concerns,
Mm-hmm.
so, like I said, eating, paying rent, paying for hydro, education, groceries, a bed, whatever the case may be, when we start taking a look at the anxiety and the stress associated with not having those things,
Mm-hmm.
and we could say that everybody could have a bed, everybody could have a room, everybody could have a meal, everybody could have a pair of shoes. And all of a sudden, you don't have to worry about that. The world's stress level, the world's level of peace, okay, increases because we don't have to worry about those monetary things. When we subsequently get involved, and we get involved in the 13-month, 28-day calendar, we go back to a time system that is, in essence, prehistoric. The first measurement of time was a woman's menstrual cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Along with the lunar cycle, from the perspective of there were 13 moons, okay,
Mm-hmm.
indicating 13 months. Many of us know from astrology that there were 13 months.
Yep.
So if we actually eliminated the conventional system of measuring time, which is the Gregorian calendar, and we created a time system that's more harmonious with the world, and then at the same time we get rid of money and the stress associated with money, and that all of us are doing what we genuinely really want to do instead of just going to get a job,
Mm-hmm.
then all of a sudden, all that stress is gone. We have peacefulness. We have harmony with regards to all humanity. And the whole thing will just be a lot more fun and a lot easier to deal with. And
Mm-hmm.
then we could walk away from the excuses of defense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you know what the world defense budget is?
No, I don't.
It's $1.8 trillion.
That's a globally.
Okay. That's
Mm-hmm.
globally. I think the US is responsible for about 800 billion of that.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? Isn't it time that we seriously came to grips with what it is that we're telling ourselves, that we're building all of these military things for the purpose of defense? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, who's ever attacked the United States?
Mm-hmm.
It's not to say it couldn't happen, but the point is, if we didn't have guns and ammunition and we all learned to respect each other as humans, as brothers and sisters, you know, whether we believe in religion or not, we have one common thread that unites every single person on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
And when you cut yourself open, you bleed red. I bleed red.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody bleeds red.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't we understand, okay, that we are all brothers and sisters and here to help each other get through the pain of life, and how to support each other in education so we can build greater things and better things and open the door truthfully to things like space travel?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have a problem. We have 8 billion people here. We may be using up Earth's resources.
Mm-hmm.
But how does that equate, you know, logically to killing people all over the world to save money for what? Let's build spaceships and rocket stations and let's get these people off the planet. Let's put them in a spaceship looking through the solar system. Let's go and live on the moon or on Mars. But
Mm-hmm.
let's do our due diligence and find out, what do we need to know before we start destroying. You know, Mars has been like Earth, a beautiful planet for billions of years. And
Mm-hmm.
what's Musk doing? He's sending a Tesla Roadster to sit on the planet and deteriorate, which really means polluting.
Yeah.
And how much of a brain do you really have to have in your head that that's probably the stupidest example of humanity expressing itself as a genius?
Mm-hmm.
I think we're at a stage where we really need to get fired up, and we need to start having, you know, old style town hall meetings where people get in a community, in a neighborhood, and they come and they talk about what are the most important aspects of life this week, this month, next year. How are we going to start sharing that with other groups of people? And I'm not talking about like-minded yes men.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm talking about people like me who want to shake the world up. I want to shake up the conventional thinking. I want to offer unconventional choices. And I don't want to be laughed at. I want to be taken seriously because I'm not the only person on this planet who thinks this way.
Mm-hmm.
And if we all united and we all started to think that there is a better way, before you know it, the so-called evil elite wouldn't have a stand. They wouldn't know what to do when we became the most powerful entity on the planet, because we could stop them.
Mm-hmm.
If we told everybody, there's a post going on in LinkedIn, don't go to work on November the 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an appeal for people not to support the people who, in essence, are giving them this job entrenched in slavery.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying we're not going to come to work. Imagine if the production lines of Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler Corporation, nobody showed up to work to build cars.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Would Mr. Chrysler get his paycheck?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's just a way of looking at things, Gurmeet. And I think that when we start to get people to start thinking in different ways, it starts to create more really wonderful thoughts, because when we start looking at the potential versus what we already know has happened,
mm-hmm.
the magic of life is, who said it first? James Allen, thoughts are things.
Yeah.
So everything that you see around you, everything I see around me was a thought that became a thing.
Yeah.
So if we've created this world, let's create another one that's better.
Yeah. And for the same thought process, is that you created a party recently, the Time Party, right? In electoral in Canada. What's the intention behind that, Richard? You know, what are you trying to achieve with that, by creating a party? Just getting a word out, or there's more to it?
Well, I think that what I want to do is I want to just offer people an alternative in the context of what do we stand for. And if we say that as an example, we can't stand for greed and corruption and manipulation by our governments, okay, specifically in the context of election, I think that we've got to take a look at how all that stuff works. And there's a gentleman by the name of Larry or Lawrence Lessig, and he's done some TED Talks on how we don't have a democracy because the democracy is run by lobbyists, and it's the lobbyists that have the money that buy the positions in government. So it's not me talking, it's a guy who's actually really studied it and recognizes there's a huge problem in political because your vote and my vote, let's face it, they don't matter. Okay? I was actually discriminated against. I couldn't go to my voting poll and vote at our last federal election because I wouldn't wear a mask.
Wow.
I can't wear a mask. I choke on my own breathing if I was wearing a mask. Okay? And I said to the guy, why don't you bring out a polling, like a little table outside, and ask one of your people if they could just sit there, you know, like the people who are inside. And there's other people besides me who want to come and vote, but they didn't come because they know that you're not letting them in. Since the September 20th election, I've been waiting for Elections Canada to get back to me about a complaint that I escalated with regards to the fact that I was stopped from my constitutional right to vote. They haven't gotten back to me. So now we're going to take it to the next step. We're going to go to the Human Rights Tribunal. And we're going to say, hey, do you know who, oh, what's her name? Would you know, I don't have a $10 bill in my pocket. On the $10 bill, Canadian $10 bill, there's a woman on it, and respectfully, I'm gapping out to her name, but she was a woman activist who fought for her rights, and she's on a $10 bill. But on the back side of the $10 bill, there's a constitutional statement, okay, that talks about not being discriminated against. Viola Desmond. Okay. You look at a $10 bill, and if you see a woman on it, it's Viola Desmond, who stood up for her rights in the Constitution. And actually, because she stood up and she wouldn't back down, she's on a $10 bill. Well, I want to be on a $5 bill.
Interesting.
Okay. I would like to see the people that, as an example, they know that we need something different. I would like to have those people become empowered to share and to gather, okay, under our constitutional rights, gather peacefully, okay, to share in the creation of what we want to have, because government's got it backwards. We vote them in or out of power. So if somebody comes along that's better than any of our existing parties, they're going to have to change. So my thoughts were to create a foundation for the party and respectfully put it out there for people to say there is a true option. But like everything else, the options, if you will, can only make comparisons to the existing thing. So for example, I'll say like this, the intent is to change the narrative, because the narrative between the top three parties in Canada is the same. We're not addressing the problems. We're not fixing the problems. We've had these problems for decades and centuries. Okay, it's time somebody actually started to do something different. And I think that that's what the purpose of the Time Party is. Whether I'm going to play a strong role in that or not, I have yet to decide. But the important thing is to establish that foundation so that people can agree that this is a much better foundation for what we believe in as principles. And maybe they're going to start to, as the expression goes, wake up and start doing something different. Who was it that said that insanity is the result of doing things over and over with an expectation of a different result? It was Einstein. Okay. And that's what humanity is doing right now. And it's sad because we have incredible talent out there. We have a lot of people who are devoting their lives, okay, to help our countrymen, to create justice, to create a positive role model and effects for humanity. So I know there's a lot of people out there, and I think a lot of those people, they're just fed up with the existing narrative, and therefore they don't really want to do anything about it. I mean, if voting liberal, progressive, conservative, or let's call it the NDP just for the sake of having three parties, if none of these parties meet the expectations of the citizenry, then why even consider them in a vote? Let's find what people really, truly want. Let's categorize it, figure out a way how to make it work, and watch and see the change in narrative and politics all over the world. And you will have leadership, okay, that thinks in the same way. It doesn't mean that, like this leadership we're talking about, right? We're talking about a way that's a way for the world to continue to evolve our species so that we don't get killed off in some massive error of something. But at the end of the day, I know I have faith in humanity that there's so many people out there that really do want to make a change. All we got to do is find each other. And we are these days. More and more people around the world are fighting, not fighting, they're getting together to support each other in the fight, okay, for what they believe in. And I think it's amazing, and I think it's going to keep on going.
Okay. Do we have more support internationally than in Canada? You mentioned that in Canada we're not getting as much support on to these initiatives, but other country you're getting a little bit more support or to this cause. What are your thoughts? Why do you think that is?
You know what? I'll tell you. I have a tremendous. It seems to me every time I watch a country, it's France. Okay, and they've got and they've been doing it for a long time, not with just this COVID issue and vaccinations and stuff. They've done it on different things and on numerous occasions in the last 20 years. They actually get up and walk downtown in Paris, and they have their cards and their things, and they're out there to make a change. So I would say that I think perhaps Canadians are just a little bit more passive, a little more perhaps empathetic, in the sense that, well, it doesn't really affect me today. But I think we're getting to the point where people are really starting to recognize what's going on. And I wish specifically, in Toronto and for every major Canadian city, when I was growing up, we had the FLQ crisis and people wanted to separate from Quebec, Now we have the Westerners, okay? Everybody west of Alberta or whatever, they want to be a different part of Canada too. Well, when we have division like that, we can't have solidarity. So it's the name of the game to reclaim that solidarity and unite all Canadians. And if all Canadians could, as an example, accept the concept of time equity and took a stand that this is what we're going to do, and we're going to push our existing governments out because they don't meet what our objectives are, and we decide that we're going to play the role. I was talking to a contact on LinkedIn, and she's in absolute agreement. She's from New Zealand, and she said, let's start with the small countries, but let's just not do people a person at a time. Let's get the whole country on board. And then let's get 2 countries or 3 countries or 5 countries on board. I don't know which way it's all going to go. But let's just say this. I truly believe that I was standing at the side of a calm water, a pond or whatever, and I dropped a stone in it. And that stone is now starting to ripple outward, and it's starting to make some changes. The book is starting to get noticed. People are interested in having a conversation with me. People are interested in taking notes and talking and trying to understand and agree or disagree with stuff. So I get the best of both worlds. I get the people who love what I'm talking about. I get the people who despise what I'm talking about. And that's just the way life is. But I think it was George Bernard Shaw that said, bad press, good press, it doesn't make any difference. Just give me the press.
Yeah.
So I would love for people in Canada to contact me. I'm offering to your viewers and listeners, if they want to go to Richard M. Kiernicki, I'm happy to exchange a digital copy of my book for your email address. Otherwise, I'm not going to get it to you. So if your viewers would like to have a copy of my book, The Capitalist's Worst Nightmare Come True, The Crucifixion of Capital, I'm happy to send anybody a complimentary digital copy. And just for clarity's sake, Gurmeet, The Crucifixion of Capital, we actually launched the first chapter of the book, or the preface, on Easter Sunday. And for the Christian community, okay, it's not about the crucifixion. It's about the resurrection of humanity's potential. So my intent in writing this book and putting it together is for people to gather and strengthen unity for the things that truly make us feel extraordinary. And I think we have the potential as humanity to unleash our full potential, especially when we don't have financial limitations. No more excuses. Oh, we don't have enough money in the budget, or we've always done it this way. Those are not the ways of what's going to go forward in our new businesses and our new way of life. When we get beyond this, and I hope that we truly get beyond this, that we all start to truly recognize how valuable our time is and how much time has been taken away from us by not being able to go to family events and religious events and have other meetings and go to funerals to see their loved departed ones. They can't even go to hospitals to see the people that they love. The outreach, the overreach of government and ruling has gone beyond a sane perspective, and we need to bring ourselves back to sanity. And maybe I'm crazy.
Yeah. No, very interesting. You definitely, with the book, you're starting a very interesting conversation, for people to chat about it, and especially you taking a perspective, you sharing a perspective that nobody probably thought about it, and now they still, they at least start talking about it, So you're opening a conversation that's very interesting. So what do you say? What are you expecting to achieve with what impact you were expecting with the book, Richard? Are you expecting more than that people start following and start building a communities? What's the impacts you were expecting out of this book?
Well, let me just say this, Gurmeet. One of the things that I've stopped having is expectations, especially when it comes to other people. So I'll say this: it's not an expectation; it's a calling to help. It's a calling that hopefully will resonate. Okay, for people who are currently maybe sitting down, and giving them a reason to get up. I would love it if people like yourself would say, Richard, let's get a group of 8 or 10 people together in my neighborhood, or let's get 8 or 10 people, friends together, or business associates together. And let's talk about this in the context of not our benefit. I'm worried about my grandchildren that I don't have yet. I brought children into the world. I was blessed. I have 3 amazing kids. And at the same point in time, if they have children of their own, I fear the world that they will enter. So I think it's time that we start to have this conversation now and get as many people excited about it and start talking about it and sharing it all over the world. Because respectfully, when we did our research, we found out that we need 3.5% of any population to implement change. So if we have, 8 billion people,
no worries.
If we have like 8 billion people, and we have 3%, we have, 250 million people that can change the world. And out of 8 billion people, 300 million or 400 million people is not an unrealistic number. And let's get those people really excited about laying a new foundation for which way humanity is going to evolve. And when people start to see that there's integrity, that there's a transparency, and that transparency brings trust.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we can start to trust each other through transparency because we can see the truth. When we do that, we start to recognize our own equality. And when we start to recognize that we can trust other people, that we're equal with other people, and that we have an option at this point in time to absolutely recreate a true democracy that would work for everybody. And it's not, I don't want to talk about a global government, but I think it's important to start recognizing that a lot of the rules between different countries, they need to be changed. There's a lot of people I've met in my life. I've met a number of Indian people that were medical professionals in India, but when they come to Canada, they can't work. Why can't we put those people, all those people who are involved in the medical fields, and why can't we come up with one book that becomes the foundation for all doctors, so that, if there's an emergency, that we can bring all those doctors to another physical location and hopefully deal with any of those emergencies, not waiting to see if that person has the right level of degree to work as a doctor in a country that he's not recognized as a doctor.
Yeah.
So when we start to open up all of these things and we bring that brotherhood together, then we're going to be a lot happier. We're going to be more harmonious. We're going to be more peaceful with each other. And I will say this, I was trying to get in this, kind of squeeze it in, but if you wake up tomorrow morning and you start thinking about what the world would look like without money, and that there was abundance for you and your family, you woke up in a bed, it was warm, you were, fortunate enough to have breakfast and some food to feed your family and make sure you got them off to a school that you're proud to send them to. Okay. And as we start to imagine, and we all start to creatively imagine, these are the changes that will materialize first. Because at the end of the day, as I said earlier, I don't think it's the maker's intention for us to be rated on the Forbes richest humans list. I don't think that's where we are. So my question is, will you join me? Will you help unite others? Will you start discussions in your neighborhood that can grow into discussions that will go across the country and around the world, that will lead ultimately to a much better way of having society interact with one another? And I'm really enjoyed conversing with you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Just in case our time is getting
it was very interesting. I enjoy reading your book. It was a very interesting book. You definitely started a conversation that I was thinking in terms of similar ideas, but you definitely intrigued me there with a different interest. But it looks like a lot of hard work put into book as well. The research you both time and capitalism, your experience. I think that all that reflects in a book, and I think that's what makes a book very interesting. But very interesting. So I learned so much from our discussion, Richard. So where can people find you? How can they connect with you?
Well, the easiest way, the two easiest ways are, number one is LinkedIn. Okay. So Richard M. Kiernicki, which is spelled Kiernicki. You can find me. Please invite me to connect with you on LinkedIn. Or go to my website and look for contact information there, or send me an email, richard@richardmkiernicki.com. And I look forward to hearing from as many people who feel motivated, that they want to do something, that they want to move things ahead. And Gurmeet, I hope you and I have a chance to meet when this pandemic has a little bit more of a clearing. And I look forward to sharing some food and some conversation with you and maybe friends, family, and business associates. So let's keep in contact and do that.
No, we'll do for sure. Look forward to that. So below this video, I'm going to include your website and your LinkedIn profile as well. So people who want to connect with you, I'll definitely encourage everybody to, connect with you, and also take your offer on, digital book and take a look. And order some copies. I'm definitely going to order some copies, Richard. And I usually keep a copies with me. So when I meet business leaders, I usually gift them a book. I think the best thing you can do is share somebody's knowledge with somebody. That's a gift your gift to the world. I'm more than happy to share that with other people.
Gurmeet, it's been an absolute pleasure. Let's make sure that you and I spend some time together.
We'll do
Okay.
very shortly, Richard. Thank you so much for your time.
Cheers. You're welcome.
Okay, have a good
Thanks
one.
so much. Okay.
Likewise. Bye-bye.